I spent 3 years building the biggest infrastructure deal in our company's history. I worked nights, weekends, sacrificed relationships, and gave everything I had. Then, on a Tuesday morning during Pride Month, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from our 3 lines. Cold. Clinical. I was fired, effective immediately. No meeting. No explanation. No dignity. The message said I was no longer the right fit for the company's image. I stood in my Sydney apartment, still in my gym clothes, staring at those words. Right fit. I knew exactly what that meant. 2 hours later, I received another message. This one from my replacement. Someone I had trained. Someone who had smiled at me in meetings. Someone straight. He thanked me for all my hard work and said he would take good care of my project. The project I had created from nothing. That afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table and made a decision. They thought they could erase me. They were wrong. The morning started like any other. Coffee. Emails. Planning my presentation for the board meeting next week. Then my phone lit up. A text from Human Resources. 3 sentences that changed everything. I was being let go. No warning. No conversation. Just gone. My hands shook as I read it again. And again. 10 minutes later, another message arrived. My replacement already celebrating his promotion. One more thing. If you have ever been judged just for being who you are, or you know someone who has experienced this, the story will touch you and you will want to follow it until the end. Subscribe and help give voice to stories that should no longer remain silent. My name is Cameron Mitchell. I am 38 years old. I have worked in commercial real estate development for 15 years. I live in Sydney, in a small flat in Surrey Hills. For the past 3 years, I worked for Pinnacle Development Group. It was supposed to be my dream job. When I started, I believed in the company. I believed in the work. I believed that talent and results mattered more than anything else. I was wrong. For my first week, I felt it. The weight of being different. I am gay. I have never hidden it, but I have never announced it either. I dress well. I speak clearly. I work harder than most people in that office. But none of that seemed to matter. What mattered was how I sounded on the phone, how I moved my hands when I talked, how I crossed my legs in meetings, how I ordered my coffee. Every single thing I did was analyzed, judged, commented on. My colleague, Brett, loved to make jokes. He would walk past my desk and say things like, "Mate, you sure you want to wear that tie?" Or, "Careful with that voice in the client call, you might scare them off." Everyone would laugh. I would smile. What else could I do? Complaining meant being labeled as sensitive, being labeled as difficult, being labeled as someone who could not take a joke. My manager, Todd, never said anything directly, but I noticed things. I was never invited to the golf weekends. I was never included in the Friday drinks at the pub. When clients visited from Melbourne or Brisbane, Todd would assign Brett or Jackson to show them around. Never me. When I asked why, Todd would say something vague. He would say the clients preferred someone more traditional, someone who fit their style better. I knew what that meant. They wanted someone who looked and sounded straight. I worked twice as hard as everyone else. I arrived early. I stayed late. I took on projects no one else wanted. I learned everything about commercial property law, zoning regulations, environmental impact studies, financial modeling. I became the person everyone came to when they had a problem they could not solve. I made myself indispensable. Or so I thought. The microaggressions were constant. In meetings, people would interrupt me. They would take credit for my ideas. They would dismiss my suggestions, then praise the exact same suggestion when Brett repeated it 5 minutes later. I watched this happen over and over. I said nothing. I just worked harder. I told myself that results would speak for themselves. Then I met Liam. He worked for a major Australian infrastructure fund based in Melbourne. We met at a conference in Brisbane. He was smart, funny, kind. We talked for hours about urban development, sustainability, the future of Australian cities. We exchanged numbers. We started texting, then calling, then flying to see each other on weekends. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Liam understood what it was like to navigate corporate Australia as a gay man. He worked in finance, where the pressure to fit in was just as intense. We would talk late into the night about the masks we wore at work, about the exhaustion of constantly monitoring ourselves, about the loneliness of success without authenticity. Liam told me about a massive project his fund was exploring, a $1.1 billion mixed-use development in Western Sydney. Residential towers, commercial spaces, retail, public parks. It was ambitious. It was risky. It was exactly the kind of project that could transform a developer's reputation. He said his fund was looking for the right partner. Someone innovative. Someone who understood the Australian market. Someone they could trust. I saw the opportunity immediately. This was bigger than anything Pinnacle had ever done. Our largest project to date was worth $200 million. This was 5 times that size. I started researching. I built financial models. I studied the Western Sydney market. I analyzed demographics, transport links, employment patterns, housing demand. I worked every night for 2 months building a proposal that was bulletproof. When I presented the opportunity to Todd, his eyes went wide. He called in the senior partners. Within a week, we had a meeting scheduled with Liam's fund in Melbourne. Todd told me I would lead the pitch. He said this was my project. He said if we won this deal, I would be promoted to senior director, maybe even partner. I believed him. I poured everything into that pitch. I flew to Melbourne twice. I refined every slide. I rehearsed every word. I anticipated every question. The day of the presentation, I was ready. Todd, Brett, and I walked into that boardroom. Liam was there, along with 5 other executives from the fund. I presented for 90 minutes. I showed them why Pinnacle was the right partner. I showed them our track record, our financial strength, our vision for Western Sydney. They loved it. At the end of the meeting, the fund director shook my hand. He said, "Cameron, this is exactly what we have been looking for." He said they would be in touch within 2 weeks. As we left the building, Todd clapped me on the back. He said, "Mate, you just saved this company." Brett said nothing. Back in Sydney, I celebrated with Liam. We went to dinner at Key. We talked about the future, about what this deal would mean for my career, about how maybe, finally, I would be recognized for my work rather than judged for who I was. Liam held my hand across the table. He said, "You deserve this. You have worked so hard." For the first time in years, I felt proud. I felt seen. I felt like I mattered. The next few weeks were a blur. The fund sent over preliminary agreements. I coordinated with lawyers. I worked with the finance team to structure the deal. I built timelines, identified risks, solved problems before they became crises. Todd started treating me differently. He invited me to partner meetings. He asked my opinion on other projects. He even invited me to Friday drinks. I went. I drank my beer. I laughed at the jokes. I pretended I belonged. Then Pride Month arrived. The company sent out an email. Rainbow logos, statements about inclusion and diversity, photos of the office with pride flags. It all felt performative, hollow. But I said nothing. I just kept working. The fund was ready to sign. We were weeks away from closing the deal. Todd told me to prepare for the announcement. He said we would hold a press conference. He said I would stand on stage with the partners and the fund executives. He said this was my moment. I should have known better. The opportunity was real. The $1.1 billion development deal was moving forward. Liam's fund had approved Pinnacle as their development partner. Contracts were being drafted. Legal teams were reviewing terms. Financial advisors were structuring the investment. This was happening. This was actually happening. Todd called me into his office on a Monday morning. He closed the door. He said, "Cameron, you have done incredible work on this. The partners are very impressed." He paused. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. He said, "We think it is best if Brett takes the lead on the public-facing elements of this deal." I stared at him. I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "The media, the press conference, the client entertainment. We think Brett has a better presence for that kind of thing." Presence. That word again. I asked why. Todd shifted in his chair. He said, "Look, you are brilliant at the technical side. No one disputes that. But this deal is going to attract a lot of attention. National media. International investors. We need someone who can represent the company in a more traditional way. Someone the clients feel comfortable with. Someone who projects the right image." I felt my face flush. I said, "I built this deal from nothing. I have the relationship with the fund. They trust me." Todd nodded. He said, "And that is why you will still be involved behind the scenes. You will manage the project delivery. Brett will handle the external relations. It is a team effort." It was not a team effort. It was erasure. I left his office and went back to my desk. My hands were shaking. Brett walked past and winked at me. He said, "Big week ahead, mate. Looks like I will be doing a lot of traveling to Melbourne." I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled and nodded. That week, everything changed. My name started disappearing from documents. Emails that used to be addressed to me were now addressetto Brett. Client calls that I had scheduled were reassigned. When I asked Todd about it, he told me not to worry. He said it was just optics. He said my contribution was valued. He said I would be rewarded when the deal closed. I stopped believing him. The fund noticed. Liam called me one evening. He said, "Cameron, what is going on? Why is Brett suddenly leading everything? Why are you not in these meetings?" I told him the truth. I told him that Pinnacle was pushing me aside because they did not think I was the right face for the company. Liam was furious. He said, "That is discrimination. That is illegal. You should report them." But I knew how that would end. I would be labeled a troublemaker. I would be quietly managed out. I would lose everything I had worked for. So I stayed quiet. I kept working. I told myself that once the deal closed, everything would be different. I told myself that results would vindicate me. I was naive. The sabotage became more obvious. Brett started taking credit for my work in meetings. He would present analysis I had done and claim it as his own. When I corrected him, he would laugh it off. He would say, "We are all working together here, Cameron. No need to keep score." But he was keeping score. He was building his reputation on my work. Todd started excluding me from key decisions. Strategy meetings happened without me. Client dinners were scheduled and I was not invited. When I asked why, Todd said it was just a casual thing. Nothing formal. But I knew better. They were building a narrative. A narrative where Brett was the genius behind the deal and I was just a support player. The fund pushed back. Liam insisted that I be included in meetings. The fund director sent emails specifically asking for me. But Pinnacle found ways around it. They would schedule conflicting meetings for me. They would say I was busy with other projects. They would send Brett in my place and apologize, saying I was unavailable. I worked harder. I thought that if I delivered perfect work, they could not ignore me. I spent nights modeling different financing structures. I coordinated with architects, engineers, environmental consultants. I solved problem after problem. Every time an issue came up, I fixed it. Every time the deal looked shaky, I found a solution. And every time, Brett took the credit. The comments got worse. One afternoon, I was in the break room making coffee. 2 junior associates were talking. They did not see me. One of them said, "I heard Brett is closing the Western Sydney deal." The other one said, "Yeah, thank God." Can you imagine Cameron doing the press conference? The first one laughed. He said, "Yeah, not exactly the image we want of project." They both laughed. I stood there frozen. When they saw me, they went quiet. They walked out. No apology. No acknowledgement. I told Liam what was happening. He held me while I cried. He said, "Cameron, you do not have to stay there. You can walk away. You can fight this. But I was too deep in. The deal was weeks from closing. If I left now, I would get nothing. I would be the person who walked away from the biggest opportunity of my career. I would be labeled as difficult, unstable, unable to handle pressure. So I stayed. I swallowed my pride. I worked through the humiliation. I told myself it would be worth it in the end. Then Pride Month started. Pinnacle sent out their email. Rainbow graphics. Statements about supporting LGBTQ employees. Photos of partners wearing pride pins. The hypocrisy was stunning. I was being erased from my own project because I was gay, while the company pretended to support people like me. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to cry. Instead, I went back to work. The deal was days from closing. The contracts were finalized. The fund had approved everything. We were waiting for final signatures. Todd called me into his office again. He said, "Cameron, I want you to know that the partners appreciate everything you have done." He said, "Once this deal closes, we will make sure you are taken care of." He said there will be a significant bonus, maybe even a promotion. I nodded. I said thank you, but I did not believe him anymore. That night, Liam and I had dinner at his place in Melbourne. I had flown down for the weekend. We talked about what came next. He said after this deal closes, you should leave Pinnacle. You should start your own firm. You have the skills. You have the network. You do not need them. I told him I would think about it. But deep down, I was scared. Scared of starting over. Scared of failing. Scared of proving them right. The following Tuesday morning, I was at home in Sydney. I had taken the morning off to go to the gym. I was planning to head into the office around 10. My phone buzzed. A text message. From Our. My heart dropped before I even read it. The message was short. 3 sentences. Professional. Cold. It said, "Cameron, your employment with Pinnacle Development Group is terminated effective immediately. Please return all company property by end of business today. HR will contact you regarding final pay and benefits." I read it 3 times. I sat down on my couch. I stared at my phone. This could not be real. The deal was closing in 4 days. 4 days. I had spent 3 years on this project. I had built it from nothing. And they were firing me via text message during Pride Month. The irony was sickening. My phone buzzed again. Another message. This one from Brett. It said, "Hey mate, just heard the news. Tough break. Thanks for all your hard work on the Western Sydney project. I will make sure everything runs smoothly from here. Really appreciate everything you taught me. All the best." I threw my phone across the room. It hit the wall and fell to the floor. I sat there, shaking. My chest felt tight. I could not breathe properly. 3 years. 3 years of work. 3 years of humiliation. 3 years of proving myself over and over. And this is how it ended. A text message. And my replacement, thanking me for training him. I called Liam. My voice was shaking. I told him what happened. He was silent for a long moment. Then he said words I will never forget. He said, "Cameron, listen to me very carefully. Do not do anything. Do not sign anything. Do not respond to anyone from Pinnacle. I am getting on a plane right now. I will be there in 2 hours. Just wait for me." Those 2 hours felt like days. I sat in my apartment, numb. I kept thinking about all the nights I had worked, all the weekends I had sacrificed, all the meetings where I had smiled through microaggressions and casual homophobia, all the times I had told myself that hard work would be enough, that results would matter more than prejudice. I had been so stupid, so naive. When Liam arrived, he held me. He let me cry. Then he sat me down at my kitchen table and said, "Now we fight back." He opened his laptop. He said, "Tell me everything. Every document you worked on. Every email you sent. Every meeting you attended. Everything." I talked for hours. Liam took notes. He asked questions. He made lists. Then he said something that changed everything. He said, "The fund does not know you have been fired yet. The contract has your name on it as the primary contact. You structured the entire deal. You have relationships with every consultant, every lawyer, every contractor. Pinnacle thinks they can just slot Brett in and everything will continue. But they are wrong. He was right. I had built this project. I knew every detail, every number, every risk, every opportunity. I had the relationships. I had the expertise. Pinnacle had the brand name, but I had the substance. Liam made a call. He spoke to the fund director. He explained what had happened. He told them I had been fired without cause days before the deal closed. He told them about the pattern of discrimination, about being pushed aside, about Brett taking credit for my work. The fund director was furious. The next morning, I received a call from the fund's legal team. They asked if I would be willing to meet with them. I said yes. That afternoon, I sat in a conference room in Melbourne with 5 lawyers and 3 fund executives. They asked me to walk them through the entire project. Every stage of development, every decision point, every risk analysis. I spoke for 4 hours. I showed them documents I had saved on my personal laptop, emails I had backed up, models I had built, presentations I had created. At the end, the fund director said, "Cameron, this is your deal. You built this. Not Pinnacle. Not Brett. You." He said, "We are not comfortable moving forward with Pinnacle given what has happened." He paused. Then he said, "But we would be comfortable moving forward with you if you are interested." I stared at him. I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Set up your own firm. We will contract directly with you. You will lead the development. You will hire your own team. Pinnacle will be removed from the deal entirely. We will pay you a development fee of $40 million over the life of the project, plus a percentage of profits. You will own a piece of this." I could not speak. $40 million. And equity. This was bigger than anything I had imagined. This was not just revenge. This was justice. This was validation. This was proof that my work, my talent, my vision mattered more than their prejudice. I said yes. The next week was chaos. I registered a new company, Mitchell Development Group. I hired a lawyer. I opened bank accounts. I brought on a small team of people I had worked with before. People who respected me. People who saw my value. Liam helped with everything. He negotiated terms with the fund. He connected me with investors. He stood by me through every moment. Pinnacle found out 3 days later. Todd called me 17 times. I did not answer. He sent emails. I did not respond. Finally, he showed up at my apartment. I let him in. He looked desperate. He said, "Cameron, what are you doing? You are destroying the company." I said, "No, Todd. You destroyed my career. I am just building my own." He said, "We can fix this. We can bring you back. We can make you a partner." I laughed. I said, "I do not want to be your partner. I do not want anything from." He tried to threaten me. He said I had stolen proprietary information. He said I had violated my employment contract. He said Pinnacle would sue. I smiled. I said, "Go ahead. Sue me. Explain to a judge why you fired your lead developer via text message during Pride Month, days before closing a $1 billion deal. Explain why you replaced him with someone less qualified. Explain the pattern of discrimination." I would love to see that. He laughed. I never heard from him again. The fund made the announcement 2 weeks later. Mitchell Development Group would lead the $1.1 billion Western Sydney development. My name was on every press release. My photo was in every article. The Australian Financial Review ran a feature story. The Sydney Morning Herald covered it. Industry publications called me a rising star, a visionary, a leader. Brett called Mance. I answered. He said, "Cameron, I did not know they were going to fire you." I said, "Yes, you did. You knew exactly what was happening. You participated. You benefited." He tried to apologize. I hung up. Pinnacle lost everything. The fund pulled all their other projects. Clients started asking questions. Why did their lead developer get fired? Why was he replaced? What really happened? The story spread. Other employees came forward with their own experiences of discrimination. A former junior associate, a lesbian woman, talked about being passed over for promotions. A transgender contractor talked about being harassed on site. The company's reputation collapsed. 6 months later, Pinnacle filed for bankruptcy. The partners tried to sell. No one wanted to buy. The brand was toxic. Todd lost his house. Brett could not find another job in the industry. The company that had tried to erase me ceased to exist. And I built the development they said I was not good enough to lead. The first 6 months of Mitchell Development Group were brutal. I worked 18-hour days. I coordinated with architects, engineers, environmental consultants, local councils, state government officials. I managed budgets, timelines, stakeholder relations. I did the work of 10 people. But this time, it was different. This time, I was building something that was mine. Something that no one could take away from me. Liam moved to Sydney. He took apposition with a different fund, one that was not involved in my project. We bought a house together in Paddington. Every morning, we would have coffee on our balcony and talk about our days. He would ask how the project was going. I would tell him about the challenges, the victories, the setbacks. He would listen. He would give advice. He would remind me why I was doing this. The project moved forward. We broke ground in month 8. The community was skeptical at first. Western Sydney had been promised development before. Promises that never materialized. But I showed up. I attended community meetings. I listened to concerns. I adjusted plans. I hired local contractors. I created apprenticeship programs for young people in the area. I made sure the development would benefit the people who lived there, not just the investors. The fund was thrilled. Every milestone was hit on time. Every budget was met. The quality exceeded expectations. The fund director told me I was the best developer he had worked with in 30 years. He introduced me to other funds, other investors. Within a year, I had 3 more projects in the pipeline. Smaller than the Western Sydney deal, but significant. My company was growing. But the most satisfying moment came from something I had planned the day Pinnacle fired me. Something I had kept secret from everyone except Liam. Something that would destroy the people who tried to destroy me. When I was still at Pinnacle, I had documented everything. Every discriminatory comment. Every time I was excluded from meetings. Every email where my work was reassigned to Brett. Every instance where I was told I did not fit the company image. I had saved it all. Not on company servers. On my personal devices. In cloud storage they could not access. I had been meticulous. Detailed. Patient. I sent it all to the Australian Human Rights Commission. A formal complaint. 300 pages of evidence. Emails. Text messages. Meeting notes. Witness statements from other employees who had experienced similar treatment. Financial records showing how I was paid less than my straight colleagues despite doing more work. Performance reviews that praised my work but denied me promotions. The commission launched an investigation. They interviewed current and former Pinnacle employees. They reviewed company policies. They examined patterns of hiring, promotion, and termination. What they found was damning. Pinnacle had a systemic culture of discrimination. Not just against LGBTQ employees, but against women, people of color, anyone who did not fit their narrow definition of professional. The commission issued a public report. It detailed years of discriminatory practices. It named specific executives, including Todd. It recommended significant penalties. The media coverage was intense. Every major outlet in Australia covered the story. Pinnacle Development Group became a case study in corporate discrimination. Business schools used it as an example of what not to do. HR consultants cited it in training programs. But the commission report was not the end. It was just the beginning. 3 former employees, including the lesbian associate who had spoken out earlier, filed a class action lawsuit. They sued for lost wages, emotional distress, and punitive damages. I was not part of the lawsuit. I did not need to be. I had already won. But I provided evidence. I testified. I made sure their case was airtight. The case went to trial. It lasted 3 weeks. The plaintiff's lawyers presented a devastating case. Email after email showing discrimination. Performance reviews that contradicted termination decisions. Paracords showing systematic wage gaps. Testimony from employees describing a hostile work environment. The defense tried to argue that the decisions were based on business needs, not discrimination. The jury did not believe them. The verdict came on a Friday afternoon. The jury found Pinnacle liable on all counts. They awarded the plaintiffs $12 million in damages. But more importantly, they sent a message. Discrimination has consequences. You cannot hide behind corporate policies. You cannot fire people for who they are and expect no repercussions. Todd declared personal bankruptcy 6 months later. His assets were seized to pay the judgment. His reputation was destroyed. He could not get hired anywhere in the industry. The other partners faced similar fates. Some left Australia entirely. Others took jobs in unrelated fields, their careers in real estate over. Brett struggled the most. He had built his entire career on my work. Without me, he had nothing. He could not close deals. He could not manage projects. He could not solve problems. Word spread quickly. He was incompetent. He had been carried. He had taken credit for someone else's work. No firm would hire him. Last I heard, he was working in retail management, a far cry from the senior director position he thought he deserved. Meanwhile, my development was thriving. The residential towers were taking shape. The commercial spaces were 90% leased before construction was even complete. Major retailers were competing for space. The public parks were being landscaped. The community was excited. This was not just a development. This was a transformation. A proof that good work, ethical practices, and genuine community engagement could succeed. The Australian Financial Review named me Developer of the Year. I was invited to speak at conferences. Universities asked me to guest lecture. Industrious Oceans wanted me on their boards. I said yes to some, no to others. I was selective. I only worked with organizations that demonstrated genuine commitment to diversity and inclusion, not performative gestures. Real change. I also started a scholarship fund. The Cameron Mitchell Scholarship for LGBTQ Youth in Construction and Development. Every year, I fund 5 scholarships for young LGBTQ people who want to work in real estate, architecture, engineering, or construction. I mentor them. I help them navigate an industry that can still be hostile. I make sure they do not face what I faced. Liam and I got married in year 2. Small ceremony. Close friends and family. We honeymooned in New Zealand. When we came back, I had 7 new project inquiries waiting. International developers wanted to work with me. Funds from Singapore, Hong Kong, and the United States were interested in Australian projects. My company was no longer just serving. It was thriving. The Western Sydney development was completed on schedule. The opening ceremony was massive. Local politicians, business leaders, community members. The media covered it extensively. I gave a speech. I talked about the importance of community-focused development. I talked about creating opportunities for everyone. I did not talk about Pinnacle. I did not need to. Everyone already knew the story. That evening, as the sun set over the new public park, Liam and I walked through the development. Families were already moving into the residential towers. Shop owners were setting up in the retail spaces. Children were playing on the new playground equipment. It was beautiful. It was real. And it was mine. I thought about that Tuesday morning. The text message. The shock. The pain. I thought about all the people who told me I was not good enough, who said I did not fit their image, who tried to erase me from my own work. And I smiled because they were wrong. Because I had proven them wrong. Not with words. Not with arguments. But with results. With success. with a $1.1 billion development that had my name on it. The best revenge is not anger. It is not bitterness. It is success. It is building something they said you could never build. It is proving that your talent, your vision, your worth cannot be diminished by their prejudice. It is standing in a place they said you did not belong and showing them that you do not need their approval. You never did. Looking back now, I understand something important. The prejudice I faced was never about my competence. It was about their fear. Fear of difference. Fear of change. Fear that someone like me could be just as good or better than them. They tried to make me small because my existence challenged their assumptions. But I refused to be small. I refused to disappear. I refused to let their limitations define my potential. Every person who has faced discrimination knows this weight. The constant pressure to prove yourself. The exhaustion of being scrutinized for things that have nothing to do with your work. The loneliness of success without belonging. But here is what I learned. Your worth is not determined by people who cannot see. Your talent does not need validation from those who refuse to recognize it. And your identity is not a weakness. It is a strength. Because surviving in a world that does not want to succeed makes you stronger, smarter, more resilient than those who never had to fight. I built a $1.1 billion development. But more than that, I built a life where I do not have to hide. Where I do not have to apologize. Where I can be myself and still succeed. That is worth more than any contract. And to anyone facing what I faced, remember this. They can fire you. They can exclude you. They can try to erase you. But they cannot take your talent. They cannot take your knowledge. They cannot take your worth. Those things are yours. And sometimes the greatest victory is simply refusing to quit. If this story inspired you, if you have ever felt diminished for being who you are, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. Here, we share real stories of overcoming and resistance. And if you have your own story of triumph against your Judas, share it in the comments. Your experience can inspire someone who is going through a similar situation. Remember, your value is not defined by the prejudice of others. Your talent is greater than any barrier they try to put in your way. And sometimes the best revenge is simply being who you are, without apologizing. Thank you for watching, and until the next story.